You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. What do you get when a Michigan mom, active in her local politics, sees her congressional representative betraying the principles he ran on? The answer? You get Anna Timmer. And sometimes she sounds like this.
You have spent the last 2 years failing to do your job. You called for the nearly unprecedented step of impeachment. And at first you gave no reason. I read every single one of your tweets. You further know that impeachment would tear this country apart if it went through and he was removed from office. So you get to make the political grandstanding that raises your national profile. Do you want to talk about how the last election you got the least amount of support that you ever have because you haven't supported the MAGA agenda? But you also know that you have no future in this district because of that as a Republican.
Today we'll hear from a much calmer Anna Timmer in a conversation about what our government is doing in response to the COVID-19 virus on today's New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski, and I'll be your host on this adventure. On today's show, we have got a conversation with Anna Timmer. She made an unanticipated splash in national politics when she stood up at that Justin Amash town hall and kind of let him have it. She'd worked on his campaign, she felt betrayed, and she was not about to let that just go by the wayside. Well, next thing you know, Anna's all over the news. A lot of folks refer to her as the girl from the Justin Amash town hall, and then people go, "Oh, yeah, that's you." Yeah, that's her. She's also a wife and a mother, and she cares deeply about the lives of women and how they should not live their lives in fear. More on that probably in upcoming podcasts. I think we're going to have her back on the show at some point. But for the record, Anna and I know each other through our connection at uncovereddc.com. Both Anna and I right there, and we've been kind of touching base back and forth on Twitter. I said, "Hey, you want to be a guest on the show?" She said, "Yes." Kind of blessed to have her on. She's also host of the Call to Liberty podcast, which has kind of been on hold for a few months due to some non-COVID-19 health-related issues that she's been going through. But we're very blessed that she was feeling better, and she was able to come back, be a guest on the show on the New Book of Daniel podcast. So before we get into the conversation with her, be sure to click subscribe below so you can be notified when we put out new shows, because I'm not regular about it. So click subscribe, click the bell. And then our show is sponsored by the Realty group. You know, when you get out of lockdown and you want to get out of the state that you're in, you can come to Northern Idaho. I actually live in Boise, but Northern Idaho is absolutely beautiful. Ty Daniels is the realtor up there for the Lift Realty Group. Northern Idaho is absolutely beautiful. And if you're looking to move, or if you just like to get a vacation house, give Ty a call at 208-640-6333. That's 208-640-6333. Ty, by the way, is a listener of the podcast. He has a lot of the same values that I have, and he is definitely would be a guy who is going to treat you right. So give him a call, 208-640-6333. All right. The truth is that I sent Anna a long list of topics we could talk about, but as has happened before on this show, the conversation just did its own thing. So I recorded that. I'm going to let you listen to it here in a second. At the end of the show, I'll tell you how to contact Anna. And as they say, without further ado, here's my conversation with Anna Timmer. All right, we are joined here today with Anna Timmer. And if you don't know who Anna Timmer is, you're missing out in life. You need to go check out her podcast and her website and her Facebook stuff. Anna, thanks for coming on the show with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We've got some interesting things to talk about in the news today. And I just thought, let's get some different perspective than just mine. Because if I start talking, I'll probably end up sounding like Mark Levin. And you know how Mark gets, he just gets into this rant, and I can do that.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk a little bit about this. Let's talk a lot about this government shutdown of our rights. We've all been locked down. Did you ever perceive that you're going to see this in our lifetime?
Absolutely not. I think that there's almost no one outside of maybe Bill Gates who could have seen this coming.
Why would you say Bill Gates?
Well, it was a little bit tongue in cheek, but there's of course lots of articles circulating where he predicted that a virus or a pandemic like this could shut down the U.S. or shut down the world.
I do find it interesting that just before the shutdown, Bill resigned from the board at Microsoft.
Yes, I heard that as well.
I guess he needed to devote more time to whatever we're doing with this.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Bill Gates has called for a shutdown for the entire country, all services, for a month.
Yeah, and President Gates, has that authority. So
I saw somebody comment, it's who elected him.
right.
But I looked at that and I saw that and I thought, well, you've got more money than anybody. You're the second wealthiest man on the planet. You can afford to do something like that. You can
And not to mention, it will likely benefit him greatly. I mean, sale on stock market,
that's an interesting thing. People keep talking about how Trump is doing this stuff to benefit Trump. And I have to be honest, I don't see that.
No.
I see him giving things up.
There's absolutely no way that this benefits him other than the fact that because he's doing a great job at being a leader, his approval rating for his handling of the virus is fairly high. But that's only because of his response to it. I mean, he's unable to do his rallies. His best work is when he meets people in person at his rallies. His best achievements have been the economy. Mm-hmm. He does not benefit, in his reelection campaign does not benefit from what's going on, other than the argument that you can make that, incumbent presidencies are sometimes historically benefited by, catastrophes. But Trump has never relied on historical precedents anyway. He's always set his own path. This is not something he ever wanted to have happen. And that's pretty clear to anybody who knows him.
I don't see him benefiting from anything that he's done personally. People say, well, he has people staying at his hotel. People would stay at his hotel anyways.
Right.
When you take a look at what happened to Obama and Bill Clinton, these guys entered office at $1 value, and then they left office, and within a couple of years are at this phenomenal dollar value. It's because they can commandeer $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a speech.
Right.
Or get a book contract, that kind of thing, a book deal.
And Trump has lost so much money since running.
Yeah, I remember him. Somewhere in the news I saw where he was saying that he's probably lost $1 billion since becoming president on his personal side. So that's a very good question, though. What has Bill Gates got to gain financially from this? That's a great question. Something else Bill Gates did, very interesting to me, a little video clip I saw, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, is Bill is saying that we need to have travel papers that tells people whether or not we've received a vaccine, and if we've had an illness already, we recovered from it. And I'm thinking, is this Nazi Germany? I see this in World War II movies where the Nazis are going, papers. You got to show some papers that you're giving yourself permission to. This is not Nazi Germany. Bill, wake up.
Right. I mean, it's absolutely, it's absolutely infuriating. And as you mentioned earlier, no one elected Bill Gates. I mean, he can shoot his mouth off as much as he wants, but nobody should take him seriously. And I hope that nobody is.
There was a very curious video that I saw of him as well, where he was talking about global population and how we need to reduce the global population. And I don't know if what he meant exactly. I failed telepathy in high school, but the dude said we can control some of this with vaccines. And I'm going to have to go look for that video again. But I was wondering, where does that statement come from? How do you control populations with vaccines? That's just a curious question I have.
Yeah, and then I've never gone too far down that road. I have several friends who kind of get into the vaccine debate a lot more deeply, and they know a lot more about it than I do. But yeah, there has been quite a few prominent people like Gates who have been talking about their desire for population control for years. And yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole. There's a lot of different theories floating around about that.
Yeah. So anyways, that Bill Gates is probably the least of our worries, although that may change.
Yeah.
You know who's really in our face a lot of stuff is this Ms. Nancy Pelosi character. And I wrote a piece for Uncover DC. And for those of you who don't know, Anna also writes for Uncover DC, although you've been kind of ill the past couple of months, so you haven't been writing much.
No, since January, I have unfortunately been unable to do my podcast or to write. And I will be talking more about my health issues soon, but thankfully they are almost behind me.
So this is the first podcast you've been on in a while.
Yes, yeah, it's the first time I've done any interview or recorded anything since December. So.
Oh wow! Well, then
Yeah.
I'm honored. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
So I wrote this piece this past week about Nancy Pelosi, how she has zero credibility and she should be ignored. And I'm a certified behavioral analyst, so I watch people's behavior, and I see everything that she does is attack, attack, attack. If there's 3 steps to her process for being Speaker of the House, it's attack, attack, and attack. When she said we weren't going to do this impeachment unless we had proof, well, then we did this impeachment. Why? There's a whole rabbit trail we could follow there about what was going on in Ukraine and what did she know and when did she know it and what was she doing in Ukraine. Adam Schiff, same thing. There's some evidence that links him there, and you never know what kind of money laundering is going on. But she didn't say squat about the coronavirus from the time that the Health and Human Services Committee secretary announced a public health emergency on January 31st until President Trump named Pence as the overseeing the coronavirus task force. And I went back and I looked, right? I got this analytical brain that I go back and look at facts. I like timelines help me out as to what leads people to think and do certain things. She rips up President Trump's speech. She then has a press conference after the acquittal defending her right to rip up his quote unquote falsehoods, even though he mentioned coronavirus in the speech. She criticizes him about the budget. She criticizes Attorney General Barr for damaging rule of law. She criticizes Trump for politicizing the intelligence community. And she accuses him of abuse of power. She had lots of attack, attack, attack during the time that the coronavirus was supposed to be an issue. And she didn't say squat until Pence gets elected. And I say that totally exposed her hypocrisy. She's just
absolutely
attack mode.
And the only thing that the Democrats were commenting on in general during that time was the racism of Trump, shutting down the travel from China.
Yes, and I linked to some of that in the article. They were calling him a xenophobe. And I think the real damage was in New York when you had these city leaders saying, they're trying to kind of wave it in Trump's face. They're going, it's okay to ride the subway. It's okay to go out to the restaurant. It's okay to go to the bar. It's okay to go to the parade. I'm going to be at the parade next Saturday. Y'all come. There's video of the New York Health Commissioner saying this.
Right.
And then I saw an article that de Blasio's staff threatened to quit unless he did something because he was just being defiant against Trump.
Yeah.
Now New York has the highest death rate of CV-19 of any state in the nation by, I think, a factor of 3.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, you live in what time zone?
Eastern, so the same as New York.
Okay, and you're in Michigan?
Correct.
Well, are they doing any kind of lockdown in Michigan?
Oh, definitely. So our state is 4th in the nation for coronavirus cases. although those are pretty much all in Detroit. There's not really a lot going on my end, which is West Michigan. But the schools are done for the year. They're not coming back. That got announced today.
Wow.
So Whitmer is our governor. She's on the short list for Biden's VP. And she has issued the shelter in place. So we're not supposed to be leaving our homes except for to go to the grocery store if we're not essential, and almost nothing is. And she just recently, today or yesterday, requested an additional 70 days of state of disaster powers. So she wants the ability to extend her stay-at-home orders up to 70 days if she wants to.
Wow.
So I think we're pretty much only behind, New York, California, and, blackface Governor Northam in terms of draconian responses. So.
Okay, I'm pulling up here this is the CDC.gov website that I've got in front of me. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes so anybody can go see it. But I'm looking at number of new cases reported. Guess what? America has already peaked.
I pray so. I absolutely pray so.
Now, does that mean that we might not ride that peak for a while? Probably will. But I think if they would let people go out and restore their lives, we're going to see fewer suicides. Have you heard of any new suicides in Michigan?
I have not looked at any numbers in Michigan. I do remember reading an article where there was a county in Kentucky that had a huge spike in a 48-hour period. That's the only thing I've read about it. But, we know from what happened during the Great Depression and the stock market crash that's absolutely a very real danger when people start going bankrupt, losing their livelihood, losing their life savings. I will quickly interject that I did read an article that not sure what the name of the organization is, but it's the Coalition of the Restaurant Owners in Michigan are estimating that definitely 10%, but up to a third of the restaurants in Michigan will not reopen after this is over.
Oh my gosh.
And they're projecting 10% of restaurants right now will not reopen.
If they dropped it today, 10% would not reopen.
Yes. And they're saying it could be up to a third.
Okay, so I'm going to I wrote a column on this, I forget, a couple days ago, also at Uncover DC, and it is the name of the column is called the Left's Scorched Earth War on Trump. And I gotta tell you, Anna, the more I read this information out here that we're seeing, I'm locked down, right? I'm here in Idaho, I'm doing my research and I'm digging for information. The more I see, the more I crunch the numbers, the more I think this is a ploy. This whole shutdown thing is a scorched earth war that has a lot of people using the situation to their advantage politically against President Trump. Right.
I think that the second half of that is an absolute certainty. The left is using this in any way they possibly can to hurt Trump and to hurt his reelection campaign. The actual source of how this whole thing started is kind of, at least for me personally, a little bit up in the air. I think there's a lot of suspect things going on with the lab that was in Wuhan and that type of thing. But it's 100% certainty in my mind that the bad actors are taking advantage of it in a fairly demonic way almost.
And I agree with you. Yeah, in no way do I think that this thing was started by anybody on purpose. I think this is a Rahm Emanuel, don't let a good crisis go to waste approach.
And that's exactly how I feel. I was talking about this with my husband the other day. that there are so many people going on unemployment right now, and they have extended and increased the length of time that you can be on it, the percentage of your previous income that you can claim. And I don't begrudge anybody, that money who was working prior to the shutdown, but what it creates is a significant inability to get the economy going again when they do reopen. I own a business up north. I have a few employees, and if you have somebody who is making what they made before and they're able to be at home with their kids, the idea that you're going to entice them to come back and work 40 hours a week for the same wage that they can make for 26 weeks, there's going to be a lot of people who they're just going to sit on the unemployment for as long as they're able to, 26 weeks, or if they've extended it beyond 26 weeks in some cases. And there's going to be a massive labor shortage when businesses try to get things going again in June or whenever that takes place. It's not we're not in a position to come roaring back. No. With the way that the unemployment guidelines are set up. There's going to be a massive labor shortage. Now, what's that going to do? Is it going to mean that the left calls for massive immigration to then take over the jobs? You know what I'm saying?
I hadn't thought about that one.
And then in 6 months, everybody falls off of the unemployment rolls, but now there's no job for them anymore. These are the things I think about. It can go this direction or this direction, but there's not really a formula to come roaring back at this point.
All right, so along those lines, this is what I was talking about. I think you have the leftists taking advantage of the crisis, because I even saw a New York Times piece where they're saying, okay, well, the stock market is down below where it was when Trump took office, and he himself said that he would use the stock market as a measure of his success. So what's the implication?
They're trying to tie it to.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that it was the highest it's ever been a month ago. Because it's now crashed, therefore Trump is not a success. That's the logical implication, or the illogical implication. To me, I see the left just pressing this and pressing this and pressing this to keep every bragging point down. If you go to whitehouse.gov, and I linked to this, and I hope it's still up, but I linked to this in the Scorched Earth column, all of Trump's accomplishments in his past couple of years, and the list was long. They have taken away almost every one of them with this, keeping everybody home. So now, to me, it's a talking point for the leftists in their election campaign to say, well, see, that wasn't there. He can't brag about that. He can't brag about that. I still think that when this all comes back, the same policies that Trump used will restore an economy. But right. You raise a very good point in that if this is what Art Laffer said, who was the guy who created the Laffer curve, who was one of Reagan's advisors. And when this first happened, when they first shut down, before any talk of a $2.2 trillion thing, he said, well, I think when they were first started talking about it, he said, no, don't go there. He said, make it an unemployment, cut the taxes, employment taxes, to encourage people to go back to work, because there'd be no taxes. They'll get more money. That needs to be the encouragement. Don't give them money, give them the money in exchange for working. That didn't happen. I think personally, Trump has got some bad advice. What do you think?
I agree. I support Trump wholeheartedly, but I do disagree with a couple of the steps that he's taken.
Yeah.
Something that I kind of started working on to hopefully submit to Tracy for publication is the lack of economic projections compared to the endless amount of COVID projections from everyone. We have every expert weighing in and making their projections. Here's what will happen if we don't flatten the curve. Here's what will happen if we do. They have endless charts and graphs, and then this is what they constantly hammer Trump with every day. This is what all the advisors surrounding him are hammering him with. And I'm thinking, where are the charts and graphs that will show how many people will go bankrupt, how many people will lose their life savings if we're shut down for 2 weeks, if we're shut down for 4 weeks, if we're shut down for 8 weeks? Where are the projections? Where are the graphs? It's just so the public can see all the information. I mean, I just like to see a split screen given to the public. Here's what will happen on the COVID front if we do this X, Y, or Z, and here's what will happen on the economic front if we do X, Y, and Z, so that we can have, you know, make an informed opinion as the public. That's what I'd like to see.
That's a great, I have not heard that before, and that is great thinking. Absolutely. I personally think that Trump needs additional advisors.
Yes.
I think I've been watching, I don't think, I've been watching Fauci, the center, he's not with the CDC, he's with the infectious disease group. But you know what? I look at it where he's been for the past 12, 15 years. He's been at that position. And in my opinion, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think I can back it up. I'm going to do a little more research, but I think this guy is deep state.
I've heard that. I've heard more than one person kind of say that.
I watched him on an interview. Here's part of where I'm going with this. Again, I'm a behavioral analyst, so I'm watching people's faces when they're talking and what they're doing. And when he's being interviewed, and you can see, he says, I could see the expression on Trump's face when he got it, that we needed to extend the lockdown. They call it the guidelines. It's a lockdown until the end of April. And it's almost like he was proud that he convinced the president to do this. I think the man is passive aggressive, because he's saying that he's telling Trump we could experience 100,000 deaths in this country if we don't do this. And that's what he was talking about as he's convincing the president to do this and of course we don't want to see 100,000 deaths. Well, guess what? If I go to, I'll pull this up right now and take a look. What's our current, as we speak, stats in the world as of today? This is April 2nd. We have 52,000 deaths in the world. This is after China has peaked. This is after Italy has peaked. This is after South Korea has peaked. America has, let's see, where is the nationwide approach? We've got 5,000 plus deaths right now. I don't see it. I don't see how we could possibly have, you know what they say, worst case scenario. And it's like sometimes these doctors that you go to, they'll give you, well, this could happen. And I had a doctor tell me one time, we say that so we don't get sued.
Well, and another good point to add to that is we need to be careful to not paint ourselves into a corner of saying, well, we don't think that they could hit this number of deaths, because we're already hearing a lot of examples of someone dying with COVID being attributed to a death of COVID. And I don't know if you heard about, they made a big deal about the first infant, the first under 1-year-old child who died with the coronavirus. And it was this huge headline, and you can just Google that, infant COVID death. And there's article after article. I had to read 7 articles before I finally got to the 7th one that admitted this child, this 10-month-old, had been hospitalized for 4 weeks, had a bowel obstruction, and that the cause of death had not been determined, and that there was going to be an investigation. So
they assigned it to COVID.
They assigned it as a COVID death. But if you actually go through article after article, you finally get to one that says they actually have not determined it. It's just that the child died and tested positive for COVID, not dying of COVID. And
did you hear about Italy? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of reports that similar things are happening here as happened in Italy, where they were coding anyone who tested positive with COVID as a COVID death. And I think about, well, the common cold, people have colds all the time. And it's like, well, if somebody's dying of cancer and then they catch a cold, and you're going to assign that as death by the common cold. And I'm not trying to compare the cold to COVID. I mean, my sister-in-law is an ER nurse, and she's told me, she was sitting with a patient crying because this patient is in such a, he's got like a 30% chance of survival at this point because he needs to be intubated. And she said only 30% of COVID patients who are intubated survive. So I'm not trying to downplay the severity, but because it's so communicable, you could have all sorts of people with all sorts of health issues contract it. Mm-hmm. You cannot assign every single one of those as a death.
As a COVID death.
As a COVID death.
Right. I heard that in Italy.
So when I'm hearing you say, that I don't think that they can get to 100,000 deaths, I hope they, I don't want them to take that as a challenge. So.
Well, I heard in Italy that they were assigning deaths any way they could to COVID.
Right. And I'm hearing rumors of that here, but what I'm not seeing is a lot of proof. The closest I got to proof was within that article. Mm-hmm. But the rest of it is kind of like rumors. Like you're seeing a screenshot of a comment on Facebook, which I don't take that as any type of proof of anything, but it makes you think and it makes you search for more information to try to confirm it. But it's a big concern of mine that they're going to be assigning, more deaths than what trying to increase the death rate percentage to make it seem like these authoritarian measures are warranted and are necessary. And then bring it back to your point about Trump. He's unfortunately been put in this position where if he tries to reopen the economy in any kind of reasonable time frame, they're going to put every single death post that date on his hands. And that's all they'll campaign on until November.
Exactly. So let me give you a little story. This is because I heard Fauci today say that we can relax the guidelines when there's 0 new cases and 0 deaths. I'm going,
which is ridiculous.
It is totally ridiculous.
We'll never reach that.
Unbelievable. And yet people are giving this guy credibility. And then what also leads me to believe that he's deep state is I saw 2 separate pieces today. One was that he said we shouldn't relax the standards until we have 0 new cases. And then I saw Kamala Harris standing up in front of the cameras saying we should have Trump stop giving these briefings, that we need Fauci up there because he provides better information. So, okay, Kamala Harris, she's suspect automatically. Yeah. But what she said, I look at that and go, okay, maybe he provides information. I look at him as a fear-mongering guy, but he's also not in contact with the governors. He's not in contact with the suppliers of medical supplies. What's he provide? Nothing but fear. And then Washington Examiner had a similar column that we should be trusting Fauci. And I'm going, what the heck's going on with this stuff? I just think the dude's deep state. Let me read something to you that I saw on Twitter last night. Because I believe that this is, as we talked about earlier, they're just full court press, attack against Trump. This person writes, I'm 67 years old with health risks. If I get COVID-19, I'm in trouble. Do not kill and destroy, all caps here, do not kill and destroy America by staying home from work. I and others like me can quarantine ourselves if we choose. Now go to work and save America and destroy the Democrats' plan to destroy America by their trying to destroy Trump.
And my dad feels the same way, and he's 73.
And my dad's 88 years old, and he says the same thing.
Yeah, my dad sent an email almost exactly to that effect a couple of days ago. So the deep state could not have asked for a better gift, because they are most successful when the American people have become financially dependent upon the state.
Bingo.
And so they've got us in the best position they could have ever asked for.
So, I know that you are a believer in Jesus, as am I.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't believe in Jesus, who are listening to this podcast, bear us through on this little part here. But there is that section in Scripture that talks about the end times, where
Right.
Jesus is saying, don't be deceived. Take
Right.
care that you're not deceived, because even the very elect could get deceived.
Yes.
And I think personally that this need to hunker down and shelter in place because of the danger of this, when I crunch the numbers, I don't see it. I think we're being deceived.
Right. And as you mentioned, from that gentleman who wrote that piece, if any individual feels that they, it's important for them, then I agree absolutely. And my immune system is not at its best right now, and so I'm taking precautions, but it should be an individual choice from a place of liberty, and it should not be enforced in the way that it is from the state. Absolutely, it's no question for me.
So let me tell you a story. I got a friend who's a pastor at a small church. I'm not going to mention the town. I don't want to get the guy in trouble. Small congregation, average age, get this, 80 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
He's in his 60s. And he said that when this all came down, that he went to the church and said, we probably shouldn't meet. And they said, you got the kids there. Hi there.
You can only keep them away for so long.
Hi there.
That's my son, Levi.
This is part of the work at home thing, right?
Right, exactly.
So he said he went to the church and said, we probably shouldn't have church. And they said, wait a minute. When we called you to be the pastor here, we wanted you to be the pastor. We have faith. We're going to come.
Yeah.
If you want to come, that's up to you, but we're going to come.
Yeah.
And so they met. This is before the governor here in Idaho put the lockdown in place.
Right.
And so this past Sunday, he told everybody, he said, okay, we're going to follow the governor's guidelines and we're not going to have church. Well, he got up on Sunday morning and he goes down to the church by himself. He walks there so that he doesn't have to, his car's not in the parking lot. Nobody knows that he's there. He goes in, puts on a pot of coffee, sits down in a pew and starts praying.
Yeah.
5 minutes later, this guy walks in. And he sits down and says, hey, church is closed. He goes, yeah, but don't I smell coffee going here? He says, what are you doing here? He goes, I'm just praying. I'll pray with you. So 5 minutes later, somebody else shows up. I saw your truck out there, to the new guy. And so and long story short, 8 people ended up showing up for church. Yeah. And they ended up having just a very impromptu Bible study.
Yeah.
The guy that walked in first, I'm gonna fight myself crying when I tell you this. The week prior, when the governor before we had this lockdown, my friend says that he gets a phone call from this guy who says, my wife just died. She'd been sick in the hospital, totally non-COVID death.
Right.
She'd been sick for a while. When did she die? 3 minutes ago. He'd called the pastor from the hospital room 3 minutes after his wife died and said, I just want to thank you for keeping the church open. If it wasn't for my church family, I don't know what I would do.
That's really powerful, yeah.
And I'm like, we got these small churches. I mean, I can go to Walmart right now with hundreds of people that I don't know and don't know if I can trust. And I can't go to a small church service if we agree to keep 6 to 8 feet apart.
Right.
To me, this is Machiavellian, draconian control freaks.
Yeah. Yeah. And the church has, globally has survived through so many different types of persecution, since Christ came, and now every church in America is closed. And it seems like all it took was a word from the government. And whereas in past times, there was, even in China, communist China, there's not full compliance. It seems that we got to near full compliance very easily here.
Because of fear and guilt.
Right.
Because people are dying. It's like people die from the flu.
Yeah,
But the coronavirus is different. Yes, it sure is.
it's different, all right.
When you take a look at the flu numbers, I had posted something on one of my Facebook pages last night, and they had said it was the number of flu deaths per year. And they said, well, is that spread out over the whole year or just the season? Or compared to the 3-4 weeks we've had deaths here on COVID.
Right.
Well, great, let's crunch the numbers, right? So if we took it down to United States deaths for the flu for the whole year, if we averaged it out, number of deaths per month for the whole year, it's the same number, within like about 200, it was the same number of deaths as we've had from COVID. Okay?
Yeah.
And a lot of people who have COVID would have been complicated by the flu, but that's beside the point. The other question is, was that just during flu season? Well, flu season is officially generally thought of as a 13-week period. If you take those same number of deaths, it's over 20,000 deaths a month.
Yeah.
And so how are we overwhelming our hospitals with this if we already have between 5 and 20,000 deaths per month? Anyway, the numbers just don't add up to me.
Right.
I got professionals who are out of work, their offices have closed, and they are depressed.
Right. Yeah.
I really think that, and I know you need to get going. I really think that the president of our country needs to get additional advisors.
I absolutely 100% agree. I don't think that asking these questions, having these concerns in any way minimizes, the people who have died, the seriousness of the virus and the issue of, the shortage of masks and the potential shortage of ventilators. I mean, those are very valid concerns. But the idea that we cannot speak out and say the measures in response is an overcorrection, is too draconian, is too authoritarian, we shouldn't have to fear a public flogging or being told that we don't care about lives lost. I don't see any reason why we can't do both, why we can't say the virus is serious and people should use caution, but know this response is not only the incorrect response, but it is something that should be heavily questioned. Why do we have this response? Why are the leaders taking these measures? When we look at the data, it doesn't add up. And so people need to be asking a whole lot more questions than they are now. And I think that, because I'm seeing this from a lot of conservatives as well, who are so quick to police one another and get so emotional about this. And I really would like to encourage anyone listening to this to not give into the fear that allows you to try to police the liberties of your fellow Americans.
That is so true. Thank you. Thank you. That's what my wife has been saying. And that's what she has been saying ever since this started. And she actually received a death threat for that.
That's awful.
And it was like, she said, you know what? I'm not sure that I want to receive a death threat. So she took herself off Facebook. She removed it from her devices, and she just said, I'm going to take a little break. And she took a break for a couple of days. And then she put it back on, and she said, I've got new rules. I'm not engaging in debate anymore. I'm going to post information. And if somebody disagrees and they make a snide comment or challenges, I'm just going to delete their post.
Yeah.
I'm just going to delete it.
Yeah.
I am not here to argue. I'm just going to post information. And if you don't like the information, keep on scrolling.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Because we shouldn't have to, we definitely shouldn't have to fear one another more than we fear the government, you know? And that's kind of the environment right now.
I could spend all day talking with you about this stuff. This is scary. I live in Idaho. I love Idaho. If I was going to live any place in the world, it's going to be Idaho. And I've been to 17 countries and 47 states. And if I'm going to live any place, it's Idaho.
Yeah.
They tend to stay out of your business here. And our governor just signed legislation making it, you cannot compete in sports if you're trans. You can't be, in other words, if you're male born and decide you're going to be a female, you can't compete in female sports.
Right.
You can't change your gender on your birth certificate.
Yeah.
And the House passed and the governor signed legislation that if and when the Supreme Court overturns R v. Wade, instantly it becomes illegal to have an abortion in Idaho.
Awesome.
Except for there's a couple of caveats in there, but they've got it in place that once the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, that is law here. So we've got a really good, what I'm trying to say is we've got a conservative, humanitarian kind of person running the state.
Right.
Why he came down with this law, I don't get it. And I'm thinking, you know, governors turn over, it's like presidents do, but you still have those people in the deep state in the different agencies. Someone sent this to me yesterday. Several people sent this to me yesterday. Daniel, take a look at this. And it's a form to report businesses that are not complying with the stay home order. It's called the stay home compliance form. And you're supposed to fill out the name of the business and what you think they're doing wrong. And then a little box, I prefer to remain anonymous. That form stayed up for probably about 3 hours before they took it down because the guy got so much pushback.
Well, it kind of seems like it's a race to the bottom with these governors, you know, who can outdo each other with the most authoritarian measures.
Your governor is it illegal? Is it illegal to administer those two drugs? We're fighting CD?
So it's, you know, it's going back and forth a little bit because she got so much pushback, but she issued an executive order that made it illegal to misprescribe. So like you couldn't, like she was enforcing it on the doctors and the pharmacists to not prescribe and not fulfill a prescription for the medication unless it was prescribed for something that it's been given for, like lupus and that type of thing.
Right.
And then she got so much pushback now that she said, oh, well, really, the only reason I did that was just because there was an issue with, you know, doctors prescribing it for their friends and stashing it and that kind of thing. So she walked it back a little bit. It's still kind of up in the air, you know, what the legality is, but yeah.
So we have a deep state in our healthcare, CDC, and Health and Human Services and whatnot, FDA. When you can, I've seen articles over the years of doctors who say intravenous vitamin C will knock this thing on its butt. These two drugs that we're talking about, I don't even know how to pronounce them anymore. My wife can rattle, she's a science teacher, she rattles them off. That's so much that can be used that we're not even considering. I don't think Fauci's factoring these things into his numbers.
Right. And I've heard about the trials with the vitamin C, and I have a good friend who is a nurse, and her husband have been talking a lot about the vitamin C trials, and she's actually going to be going over to Detroit for 6 weeks to work with the COVID patients, and she is, you know, really curious to see if they're going to to try out the vitamin C therapy and to see for herself how it works, because she's more natural minded and that type of thing as well. So yeah, I really hope that they're giving these treatments a fair shot to see if, to see if these could be the answer, or at least, the answer in some cases.
Please, yes, because you invariably have the sticklers who want the double-blind, placebo-tested 6-month trial. It's like, you know,
and
what?
How are you going to get that?
In 6 months, our curve is gone. So
right.
you're not saving lives, buddy. It's not going to hurt them.
Right.
It's already approved. Try it.
Right.
So let me close with this little story. I'm going to go back to high school here. We had a little project. I was in a film studies class in high school. How to make film, the theory of film, what do you evoke when you try to put music in and different ways people move on the screen. So it's all behavioral stuff. When these directors, they want to convey an emotion on screen, they set certain things up, certain lighting, certain framings, all those things. One of the projects we had was, okay, here's one crew with a camera. I want you to go out and show how wonderful our school is. And you crew over here, you take your camera and you go out and you show how bad our school is. And you come back with these 2 different movies showing the same school.
Right.
But what are you choosing to portray? What are you
Right.
choosing to put on the film? Sounds
like American journalism.
Yeah, because right now I think we're seeing one side of everything. Like you said, we're not seeing those. That's a great thing, and if you should write about that, by the way.
Yeah, don't steal my idea.
I'm not stealing your idea. I will give you credit if I mention it, though. But
I'm worried that Tracy's going to fire me if I don't send an article soon. So.
And what we're talking about, if you've just tuned in, is both Anna and I write for Uncover DC. Tracy Beans is the senior editor-in-chief there. Anyways, I think your thing about the idea of let us see the ripple effects of shelter in place, how many people commit suicide, how many people go bankrupt, how many businesses go under. You're right. Nobody's talking about that. And I will probably talk about it, but I'm going to credit you every step of the way. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. And I'll reference this podcast. How's that? They need to come watch you say that on this podcast. The thing is that Anna is got her own podcast that you should listen to. How do we find out about that?
So it is called the Called to Liberty podcast, and you can find it on YouTube. You can also type in my name in YouTube as Anna Timmer. And then it's also, if you don't do the YouTube thing, it's also on, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and that type of thing too. So audio or YouTube.
And how do we find you on Twitter?
It is, you can just look up again, my name, Anna Timmer, or the handle is Veritas Sola.
At Veritas Sola?
Correct.
Okay, and do you have a Facebook page?
Yes, and I don't post on there as much, but it's just my name, Anna Timmer. So
Anna Timmer. Okay. Anything else we should know about you?
No, not at the moment. I'll be hopefully, getting back going with my podcast soon, and then I'll be sharing a little bit about my absence. But no, nothing to share today.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on the upswing for sure.
We've been, for those of you who don't know, this is my first time talking with Anna face-to-face. We've chatted a little bit back and forth on Twitter Messenger, just because we both write for Uncover DC, but this is our first time to chat. And it was a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for being here, and feel better. Stay safe. You got that health condition, so definitely stay out of quote unquote harm's way.
Right. Stay away from the corona.
Do the Dos Equis instead. Sure, bad joke, but sure. Okay, we'll talk with you soon. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. I really enjoyed that conversation with Anna, and I'm so glad she took some time to meet with me today and discuss some of the issues facing our country. Very important issues. I'm certainly hope to have her back for some future dialogue. As she said there at the end, you can track her with her podcast, the Calls to Liberty podcast, on Apple and also on YouTube. I'm going to put links to those in the show notes down below. You can also follow Anna on Twitter at Veritas Sola, and I'll link to that in the show notes too. And of course, you can always leave some comments down below. I always look at those, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them there, or you can send me questions to newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. If you've got any news tidbits about what's going on in your community that you think I should know about, like I said, just reach me at newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. I think we're being sold a bill of goods. I think this is some deception going on here, and I'd like to know more about what's in your community. If you see something, let me know. You can also track me on Facebook, New Book of Daniel there. You can track me on Twitter at New Book of Daniel. And of course, you can read my political writings at uncoverdc.com. This is Daniel Bobinski. This is the New Book of Daniel podcast. I thank you for listening, and we'll catch you guys on the next show.